Have you ever played Cities Skylines 2 and wondered how exactly are you getting power to all the things that you build in your city? Well, neither do I, but it becomes a really interesting question when you think about it. Just imagine in the real world, our city spends billions and billions of dollars creating, maintaining and managing these electrical infrastructures. And Cities Skylines 2 claims to be one of the most realistic city building simulators out there. So today we're going to take a closer look at how realistic Cities Skylines 2's electrical infrastructure actually is, and what it gets right, where it falls short, and how closely it emulates the real world power grids. Let's start with the power generation. Cities Skylines 2 actually gives us a surprisingly wide range of electricity production options, covering both renewable and conventional sources. In this video, we are going to judge how realistic these systems are using three main criteria: how they look compared to real life, the resources and workers they require, and the electricity output capacity of each plant. At the start of the game, we already get three different options for wind power generation. Let's go through them from smallest to largest. The smallest option is the windmill. The closest real-world equivalent I could find are the old windmills that were commonly used on farms across North America in late 1900s. Visually, these look very similar to their real-life counterparts, and just like in the real life, they are usually unmanned. However, this is where the realism starts to fall apart. In the real world, these traditional windmills can typically produce around 200 kilowatts of power. In Cities Skylines 2, the same structures can generate up to 2 megawatts. That's roughly 10 times more power than what would be realistic. So I would definitely call that a significant deviation from reality. Next up, we have the small wind turbine. These are clearly modeled after modern onshore wind turbines, the kind most of us are familiar with. Visually, they look spot on. And in terms of electricity output, they are actually quite close to their real-world counterpart. Where things get a bit unrealistic is how they're implemented in the game. In the real world, wind turbines almost always exist in groups as part of a wind farm, usually supported by a control center and at least few workers. In Cities Skylines 2, however, these turbines function as completely standalone units and require no workers at all. That brings us to the large wind turbines. These are massive structures capable of producing up to 6 megawatts of electricity, which lines them up closely with the offshore wind turbines in the real world. Interestingly, Cities Skylines 2 allows us to place both small and large wind turbines offshore, effectively letting the player design their own offshore wind farms however they like. One of the biggest drawbacks of the wind power in the real world is that the wind changes over time, and with that the electricity output of the wind turbines also change. Unfortunately, in Cities Skylines 2, the wind never seems to change, and the electricity output of these wind turbines are pretty consistent. So overall, wind power in Cities Skylines 2 looks visually accurate and sometimes even get the output numbers right, but often simplifies or completely ignores how these systems actually operate in real life. Then we move on to conventional power plants such as coal, gas, geothermal and nuclear. Overall, these are actually very close to their real-world counterparts. The visual design, the amount of resources they consume, the number of workers they require, and even their electricity output are all fairly realistic. So instead of breaking down each of these individually, I want to focus on the one thing that stood out to me the most. That power source is hydroelectricity. At first glance, hydroelectric power plants in Cities Skylines 2 seems wildly unrealistic to me, mainly because of their massive 20,000 megawatt maximum power output capacity. That number just feels absurdly high when you first see it in the game. But after looking into it a bit more, it turns out generating this much electricity with hydropower is actually not unrealistic at all. The best real-world example is the Three Gorges Dam in China, which has a maximum power output of 22,500 megawatts. So considering real-world examples like this, I'd actually say the hydroelectric power plants in Cities Skylines 2 are surprisingly realistic, even though they might feel overpowered at first. Taken as a whole, power generation in Cities Skylines 2 ranges from simplified to impressively accurate depending on the source. In the next part of the video, we'll move away from power generation itself and take a look at how electricity is distributed and managed across the city, which is where things get a bit more unrealistic. So let's talk about transmission and distribution. Cities Skylines 2 significantly improves realism by clearly separating local distribution from high-capacity transmission lines. Transmission lines connecting power plants to substations are handled in a very realistic way. In the real world, electricity is transmitted over long distances at high voltage and then stepped down for local use, and the game captures this idea quite well. Substations acting as nodes in the electrical grid is a solid abstraction of how real electrical networks function. That said, the system is still heavily simplified. There is no different transmission line capacities, no power loss over long distances, and no grid congestion. In Cities Skylines 2, as long as everything is connected and the capacity is high enough, electricity simply works. The same applies for the distribution network. In Cities Skylines 2, every road except motorways has underground power cables by default, each capable of carrying 50 megawatts of electricity over any distance. Personally, I find it a bit strange that even dirt roads comes with underground power cables. In reality, underground cables are significantly more expensive than overhead lines and are usually reserved for dense urban areas where they actually make sense. Another major part of real electrical networks that's missing in the Cities Skylines 2 is the electrical demand curves. In real cities, electricity demand fluctuates based on economic activity, time of day, and seasons. Cities Skylines 2, on the other hand, treats electricity demand as mostly static. So once again, we see the same pattern. The foundation is realistic, but the complexity is intentionally reduced to keep the game playable and accessible. So how realistic is the Cities Skylines 2's electrical infrastructure? Visually and conceptually, it's one of the most realistic city builder power systems ever made. It includes generation types, transmission networks, and substations, all grounded in real-world principles. But under the hood, it's still a simplified simulation. It prioritizes clarity and gameplay over engineering level accuracy. And honestly, that's probably a good thing. A fully realistic electrical grid would be incredibly complex and not very fun for most players. Still, Cities Skylines 2 strikes a strong balance between realism and playability, and it's a big step forward for infrastructure simulation in city building games. Let me know in the comments what system you want me to analyze next. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, consider subscribing. Thank you guys for watching. See you all in the next video.